Good morning. Welcome to this morning's Allowable ex parte briefing. This briefing has been requested by Duke Energy Carolinas LLC, Duke Energy Progress LLC, and Piedmont Natural Gas. Mr. Melters, do you have anything to add to the docket?
Not a thing. I'll read the notice if you'd prefer.
Thank you.
We are here pursuant to notice of request for allowable ex parte communication briefing scheduled for today, December 11th, here in the Commission's hearing room. And the parties requesting the briefing have already been identified. The subject matter to be discussed at this briefing is update on Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Thank you.
We'll now take appearances from the parties.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you. My name is Heather Shirley Smith. I represent Duke Energy Carolinas, Duke Energy Progress, and Piedmont Natural Gas for the purposes of this allowable ex parte. And I can introduce our speakers now, or I can come back up in a moment if you'd allow me.
How about let's do that in a moment.
All right.
And our third party, our neutral.
Thank you, Commissioner Belser. Jeff Nelson. Here is the representative of the Executive Director of ORS.
Mr. Nelson, do you want to go ahead and give some instructions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Nelson. I'm the Chief Legal Officer for the Office of Regulatory Staff, and I'm here today as the designee for the Executive Director of ORS. This allowable ex parte, as Mr. Melchers has just stated, is to be presented by Piedmont Natural Gas, Duke Energy Carolinas, and Duke Energy Progress, and conducted in accordance with the provisions of Section 58-3-260, subsection C. As the ORS representative, it's my duty to certify the record in this case of the proceeding to the Chief Clerk of the Public Service Commission, Ms. Boyd, within the next 72 hours and to verify that it has been conducted in accordance with the statute. The requirements of that statute, 58-3-260C, are in part that the allowable ex parte be confined to the subject matter which has been noticed. In this case, the issued notice topic is update on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. I therefore ask the presenters, commissioners, and anybody else to please limit any discussion to just that topic. Under 58-3-260, participants, commissioners, and commission staff are prohibited from requesting or giving any commitment, predetermination, or prediction regarding any action by any commissioner as to any ultimate or penultimate issue, which either is before or is likely to come before the commission. The presenters may not ask the commission for anything in short, and the commissioners can't promise anything. I'd also ask that the presenters, commissioners, please try and refrain from referencing any documents that are not specifically included in the presentation, because otherwise we got to track those down within 72 hours. Finally, when everybody came in today in the audience, as well as the presenters, you should have picked up a piece of paper and signed in the back. Please make sure that you sign and return that document prior to your leaving today. If you don't, we're going to have to track you down too. I don't have anything further. Thank you very much, Commissioner Belser.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Ms. Smith?
Good morning. First of all, the companies would like to thank the Commission for its time in allowing us to be here today. We also appreciate the Commission allowing us the use of a panel for presentation today. I'd like to note and introduce our speakers. Brian Heslin is here. He is Deputy General Counsel at Duke, and he is an attorney involved in these matters and will be providing a legal update on the status of the proceedings related to Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We also have with us Sasha Weintraub, who is Senior Vice President, Natural Gas Business for Piedmont Natural Gas, as well as Joseph McAllister, who's our Managing Director, System Optimization Fuels and System Optimization Department, and he is with Duke Energy Progress, but of course provides services broader than that. Our presenters will tell you a little bit more about their role in this project and what their daily job entails. And with that, I'll also note that our presenters have been instructed of the challenges with having a multi-person panel, and they have committed that they will not talk over each other no matter how excited they get about the topic. We understand the difficulty with the court reporter and understand the importance of only one voice being heard at one time. And so with that, the panel is ready to begin.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Who's going first? Turn your microphone on, please. It's a little button at the base. Yeah.
I think I'm hot now.
There you go.
Once again, thank you for having us today. As Ms. Smith indicated, my name is Brian Heslin. I'm a Deputy General Counsel. My primary duties are lead state regulatory attorney for Piedmont Natural Gas and the Natural Gas Business Unit. I also supervise the FERC electric and natural gas teams for the company. And also I'm involved in operational issues on the natural gas pipeline side of things. I'm going to provide a little bit of introduction and also provide the legal update. And then I'm going to hand it off to my colleagues here to discuss some of the things involving the need of the pipeline and other project-related information that they'll provide to you. But to start off with the introduction, I'm sure folks are aware, but just to kind of set the table, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is a proposed approximately 600-mile interstate pipeline project. It's designed to bring critical natural gas infrastructure and supply to the southeast in the mid-Atlantic region. Historically in this country, natural gas supply flowed, at least on the East Coast, from the Gulf up through the north. And you know, up to 10 years ago, domestic supply was dwindling until the advent of hydrofracturing and horizontal drilling technology and the ability to leverage shale plays resulted in an increase in domestic supply and production. Because of that, natural gas prices decreased significantly and have been stable at a lower price. That has led to regional supply options for utilities across the country, and in our region in particular, the ability to access the production fields in the Marcellus and Utica shale plays became an option. The utilities have utilized existing pipelines to bring that gas down from the north, but the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is specifically designed to leverage those supply options and to transport gas down from Pennsylvania and West Virginia through Virginia and into North Carolina, but also essentially to serve the states and the eastern parts of the states in the mid-Atlantic region. The owners of Atlantic Coast Pipeline are Dominion Energy, Duke Energy, and Southern. Dominion is the majority owner and the operator of the pipeline. So if you see they will be operating the pipeline. They're also the proponents for the FERC certificate applications and other permitting in that area. Duke Energy owns a large proportion of the pipeline, less than half, and then Southern owns a piece as well. The primary customers would be considered the anchor shippers who have signed long-term contracts, capacity contracts on the pipeline once it's built, are Duke Energy, Dominion, and Southern, and in particular, and who we represent today, are the utilities and the LDCs in the area where this pipeline will potentially serve. So Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress have signed precedent agreements and reserved a significant amount of capacity, as has Piedmont Natural Gas. All those utilities have their separate needs for these services, as will be discussed later. On the Dominion side, Virginia Power and in Virginia, obviously, and then Public Service of North Carolina in North Carolina. And then on the Southern side, Virginia Natural Gas also is a shipper on the proposed pipeline. So that just kind of gives an idea of not only the primary customers that are served, but the geographic layout of the pipeline. And as you can see from the picture there, the pipeline will run and serve the eastern part of the state. Currently in the Carolinas, the Transco pipeline is approximately along the 85, Interstate 85 corridor. So this pipeline will be east of that interstate pipeline, and as I said, will provide high pressure and supply to the eastern portions of the mid-Atlantic states. So the legal update is to provide an idea of the challenges that the pipeline has faced, and for folks who are aware, there has been significant delay in the construction of the pipeline, and so we thought it would be a worthwhile endeavor for us to lay out at least a brief outline of the legal challenges, and then at least from a judicial perspective, what the timing may be to address those challenges. And so I will provide this from, obviously, where the customers and not the pipeline. I won't be making any arguments either way, just laying out the status of the various cases, and then obviously I'm open to questions at any time or at the end of this. But just to provide a little context here, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, is the authorizing certificating agency for interstate pipelines in this country. And in October of 2017, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline received its FERC certificate. That certificate is premised or contingent upon the pipeline receiving other permits or rights-of-way or other requirements needed before they can proceed with construction. And so the next number of cases that I'm going to talk about on these slides are challenges to the agency actions or the agency permits that were required by the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in order for them to proceed with construction. The primary cases that I'm going to discuss are in the Fourth Circuit. The Fourth Circuit of Appellate Court is a federal court. It is seated primarily in Richmond, and the Fourth Circuit comprises of North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, Maryland, and in the D.C. area, but the D.C. Circuit also serves the D.C. in particular. We've had one panel, or ACP has had one panel of 3 judges hear all these cases just to keep consistency in the subject matter. And so the cases I'm about to discuss, I just wanted to give you an idea of where those cases are being heard, and that they're all being heard before one panel of 3 appellate court judges. The largest or the most significant challenge to date for the ACP project was a case that was rendered in December of last year, December 13, 2018. The case is called Cow Pasture, at least the let's say the short reference. The name of the preliminary party is Cow Pasture, but the real issue about this case is the Appalachian Trail crossing. In that case, the Fourth Circuit found that the U.S. Forest Service, which had provided a special use permit for the pipeline to cross the Appalachian Trail or cross under the Appalachian Trail, the crossing would actually be around 600 feet below that trail, that the special use permit provided by the U.S. Forest Service was vacated by the Fourth Circuit. The reasoning being the Fourth Circuit found that the U.S. Forest Service does not have the statutory authority to grant a crossing under the Appalachian Trail. The Fourth Circuit found in that case that it's the National Park Service which administers the Appalachian Trail, which is the proper agency to allow a crossing under the Appalachian Trail. The issue with that is that under the Mineral Leasing Act, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but under the Mineral Leasing Act, which provides for the permitting of oil and gas pipelines, units or lands within the National Park Service are specifically excluded. So the result, or the result that is being claimed by Atlantic Coast Pipelines and the amicus briefs before the Supreme Court is that the effect of the Fourth Circuit decision in the Appalachian Trail case is that it would take an act of Congress in order to receive a crossing of the Appalachian Trail. And the practical effect of that is that without a crossing across the Appalachian Trail, which folks may or may not know runs essentially along the entire coastal area, inland of the coast, it would bifurcate the pipeline, and the supply access to supply that I mentioned earlier in the previous slide would not be accessible because of the break and the bifurcation with the inability to cross the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So that case is pending. It was recently granted certiorari by the U.S. Supreme Court. The oral arguments will be heard in February, and just based upon Supreme Court precedent as far as timing, there's an expectation that there will be a decision by the Supreme Court in summer of 2020, just so that gives you an idea of the timing of when that particular issue will be addressed. Subject to that vacature, there's been no construction granted or requested by the Appalachian Trail since that decision. And so there is no current construction going on in the project besides just maintenance and stability type construction efforts. The next cases I'll go through much more briefly, but in August of 2018, the same Fourth Circuit panel vacated the original right-of-way to utilize a small portion of the Blue Ridge Parkway to facilitate construction of the pipeline. This area is adjacent to the Appalachian Trail crossing, very close to it. So upon the vacature of the Appalachian Trail special use permit that I just discussed, the agency, which had already rendered a second right-of-way, the National Park Service, they went back to the same court and requested a remand of the second permit. Essentially, it's in a wait-and-see situation. Wait and see what happens with this Appalachian Trail case. And so the Blue Ridge Parkway permit, as it's indicated there, is still up in the air as well, pending at least some progress or decision at the Supreme Court level. The other significant cases, one is an environmental related case, and that involves a biological opinion. In order to receive a FERC certificate or be able to proceed with construction under that FERC certificate, the pipeline has to have a biological opinion. The biological opinion is an assessment by the Fish and Wildlife Service to determine whether the construction of the project will endanger the existence of or have an adverse effect on the existence of a species or their necessary habitat. And then if so, then the biological opinion would require alternatives to the proposed either pathway or the construction. The biological opinion in this case, there were two, and both were vacated by the Fourth Circuit. The first one was the vacature of the incidental take statements, which are under the biological opinion, but for the purposes of today, I will say that the Fourth Circuit in July of 2019 vacated the biological opinion for the entire project, and there has been no new biological opinion issued by the Fish and Wildlife Service. That in and of itself, that opinion would typically result in a stay of construction as well. So with the Appalachian Trail and the biological opinion, both of those situations would be an impediment to any construction. We don't have any information on when the new biological opinion will be issued, but as I said before, there's a wait-and-see game going on, or wait-and-see situation with the Appalachian Trail case. The air permit for the Buckingham Station, the oral arguments were heard in October of this year. There's no decision on that yet. The only thing I would note in that case is the agency in that case was not a federal agency. It was a Virginia State Air Pollution Control Board, but that appeal of that decision was heard before the Fourth Circuit panel in October. And finally, the actual FERC certificate has been challenged. That case is before the DC Circuit. So that out of all the cases that I've discussed, and there have been other challenges, and I try to focus on the primary ones, which are delaying the construction of the project. This is the only case that is currently before the DC Circuit. It's a number of cases were consolidated into this one appeal. In October of this year, the DC Circuit placed this entire case in abeyance. The justification for that, or the rationale, was to wait and see what happened with the Appalachian Trail case, the Cowpasture case, which will be heard before the Supreme Court. So that's a brief, or maybe not so brief, outline of the legal challenges before that that the pipeline has been dealing with, and the reasons why the project, which was originally supposed to go into service, at an earlier date, is looking to be delayed for a number of years beyond the initial date. And so with that, I will pass it on to my colleagues to discuss the other issues.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir. Commissioner
is it
Irvin.
too early to ask questions? I have a legal question, so it might be best for Mr.
I think Mr. Heslin indicated he would take questions as we went.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the United States Supreme Court grant of certiorari for the Fourth Circuit decision on the Appalachian Trail permitting, do you see that case to be in a posture where the United States Supreme Court can make a final determination, or is it such that it would have to be remanded back for further hearing?
The issue before the Supreme Court is squarely a legal one, where it is whether the U.S. Forest Service or the National Park Service is the proper agency to grant a permit. If the Supreme Court were to find that the U.S. Forest Service is rightfully the proper agency, there would still be a need for the U.S. Forest Service to render another special use permit, because the original one was vacated, and it was not only vacated for this legal question, it was vacated as arbitrary and capricious. So there would have to be a remanded action.
So you go back to the U.S. Forest Service, go back through that process, and then there are potential appeals from that.
Yes.
Go back through the district court and then the Fourth Circuit. Is that how it would go?
That's correct. The actual special use permit could be challenged again, obviously under different grounds.
So I'm curious, have the parties had any negotiations? I realize you're dealing with different sets of parties, but have you tried to reach some kind of resolution, some kind of universal settlement by way of mediation or something like that?
I'm not aware of any. Obviously, I'm speaking on behalf of the customers needing service, but I'm not aware of any discussions or potential mediations to settle the case.
Well, it's a complex case, obviously, involving multiple parties, so, it might, it would be a tough set of issues, obviously, to resolve. However, in the interest of time, expense, and protracted litigation, it would seem that perhaps there might be some possibility that an accord could be reached. All these parties have common interest, I would think, in resolving the case. And right now, the environmental groups have leverage because of the cost delays are mounting, and perhaps they could come with a wish list of things that they'd like. It occurred to me that, for example, there could be a way to do some mitigation work around the Appalachian Trail. The parties could agree to help, fund that through charitable contributions or otherwise, to expand the trail, improve the trail. Same thing with the Blue Ridge Parkway, in exchange for, some kind of agreement to dismiss litigation. In addition, as technological advances go forward, we're already seeing Australia using carbon capture. And in order to do the carbon capture, they have to have a pipeline, and they have to pipe it back underground, and that has already happened on the west coast of Australia. And so one out-of-the-box thought I had was, okay, well, maybe the environmentalists would be interested in having access to the pipeline for carbon capture at some point, which obviously promotes the goal of removing CO2 and methane emissions from the environment. So I want to encourage you to reach out to the other side and see if there's some kind of middle ground. You know, I think that where we are on this issue is that because the price of natural gas has dropped so precipitously and is so low, and it's projected to remain low for a number of years, and it's cleaner than coal. It seems to be a bridge to the future until we can come up with either a smaller nuclear model, which in my view is probably not going to happen anytime soon, because every nuclear plant that's been built in this country has had multiple cost overruns and delays, and we all know what happened in our state here in South Carolina. And what's the problems that are happening right now in Georgia with the Vogtle plant because of delays and cost overruns. So that leaves us with natural gas as a bridge to the future. And until technology can come in and give us some help with storage to improve the battery capacity for solar storage and renewable storage from wind and other sources, we've got to have reliable supply of fuel. And as we all know, solar can't provide that 24/7. The sun doesn't shine every day, and winter peaking is always going to be a problem until we can get the storage piece in place, and that's going to take time and money. So, you know, looking long term, you know, I know that there's a lot of opposition to fracking and what environmental effects it has, but we have to have reliable source of fuel, and it makes sense for the ratepayers. If we're going to look out for the ratepayers' interest, the cheapest alternative in the foreseeable future is natural gas. And so I just make those observations. I know that there may be some that don't want to compromise. They take, you know, a philosophical view that we don't need it. But my question is, well, how can we do without it? If it's so cheap, it's going to help us keep ratepayer rates low. And in fact, over the last few years, it's resulted in your company coming back and actually refunding money based on the fuel case adjustments to ratepayers. And so it's already showing that it's keeping rates low, and in fact, they're refunds to taxpayers. So, you know, it's just a complex issue, and I hope that all sides could sit down and find a really good mediator and just, you know, talk to one another, because, you know, the likelihood is if you don't, it's going to be tied up in litigation for years and probably will never be built. And then both sides lose an opportunity to advance the ball. And I'm not sure where we'll go if we don't have access to natural gas. Just aren't many options. Coal is clearly the most harmful from an environmental standpoint. And we've got to get cleaner and greener, and natural gas is a better option than coal. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin, and your points are well taken. Obviously, I can't speak for the project, but certainly if sides are willing to discuss, perhaps creative options can be considered. So thank you.
Commissioner Whitfield.
Commissioner Bell, sir, I have at least 3 or 4 questions for Mr. Heslin, but if it suits the party better and you better, the commission better, I would hold mine until Mr. Weintraub and Mr. McAllister have done their presentations. Perhaps they might answer them, but if not, Mr. Heslin, you've sparked at least about 3 questions in my mind I want to ask you. So I'll yield at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Weintraub?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Sasha Weintraub, also known as Alexander Weintraub. I'm the Senior Vice President in charge of Piedmont Natural Gas. So that is the local gas distribution company, provides natural gas for heating, for hot water, for manufacturing processes in our service territory. So I'd like to click through a few slides quickly here just to, again, expand upon the discussion around the need for ACP. On this map, what you see is the Transco pipeline. Historically, or you can see the Transco pipeline runs from South Texas all the way up into the New York region. And this is the major interstate pipeline that we use in the Carolinas to receive natural gas from. There's also some natural gas that comes off from the southern natural gas system as well, but this is by far the biggest interstate pipeline that we have. Historically, the natural gas came from the Gulf of Mexico up to the north and crossed over into North Carolina, South Carolina, and into the New York region. But with the finds of the shale gas, that has really changed the flow of Transco, and most of the gas now is coming from the north down into the south. So what you can see here is a depiction of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. I'll get into more details in a second. That the customers decided as we went to market, let's try to access this natural gas in such a way that it brings it to regions that are underserved with infrastructure, which is why we selected the path that you see here on this map. And again, I'll get into more details in a second. So some of the drivers for ACP when we went to market out in 2014 was to support the needs of Duke Power on the generation side as natural gas units were being built to replace retired coal, as well as for additional growth. It was also to support the needs of Piedmont Natural Gas as our customer demand grew and required additional infrastructure. Having a second pipeline into the Carolina region provided diversification. Right now, we are supplied, again, by one major interstate pipeline. And there have been times, Transco is a great operator, but there are times when pipelines do have maintenance issues, do have issues that require them to come down. Transco has not had that situation, but across the U.S., other pipelines had. And since this is our one major pipeline, if that ever happened, there would be a challenge as far as serving the needs of customers that are rely upon that pipeline for supply. So diversification was able to provide, one, a competitive pipeline alternative and some geographic diversity. It was able to provide an increase in flexibility and enhance our reliability to the Carolina infrastructure by providing this second pipeline, allowing for that reliability. It also provides direct access to lower cost shale supply in the growing production region of Marcellus and Utica, which what we'll show you in a few slides has been a prolific find for the U.S. So in summary, ACP is the lowest cost option that provides this new diversified infrastructure to meet our growing and existing needs, provides access to low-cost supply in the Marcellus region, provides a new source of natural gas, so again, allows us to have a diversity of supply, and provides increased flexibility and reliability for us to mitigate any unforeseen pipeline issues. This is a more detailed map. I just want to get a couple highlights for you here. The project is a large greenfield project, so it is new build, roughly 600 miles long from West Virginia down into North Carolina. The initial pipeline capacity is 1.5 billion cubic feet per day, with expansion up to 2 cubic feet per day. And again, we'll get you into some context around what that means here in a few slides. ACP does provide access to these supply points in Marcellus where we're able to provide low-cost natural gas. You'll see that the pipeline itself has a couple different diameters. So in West Virginia and Virginia, it's a 42-inch diameter pipe coming down. You can see at the Virginia-North Carolina border, there's a lateral. That's a 20-inch lateral that goes to the Norfolk, Virginia region to supply their gas needs. They are a growing area for a variety of reasons, not just population, but also their industrial load and their military bases. So they have a need for additional supply as well. And finally, it comes down into North Carolina as a 36-inch diameter pipe. The pipeline does require 3 large compressor stations located along the path in order to provide the high-pressure delivery. And ACP will interconnect with a few key points. It will interconnect with the Transco pipeline, so you will be able to buy gas on ACP and bring it into Transco and on points that we have on Transco, so there will be an interconnect. And then it will interconnect with the Piedmont natural gas infrastructure system at 3 main points in the Carolinas. I just want to review for you quickly the customers. So you can see a list of the customers, 20-year commitments. And the point I'd like to make as well is back in 2014, when we went to market for this pipeline, it was we, the customers, who went to market. We solicited the market for pipeline alternatives. We asked for a variety, and we selected that pipeline that ultimately is now ACP. Of all the providers of that RFP, we did ask them to allow us the option of being an owner as well. And many of the bidders into that, into our process wanted some diversification of allowing other owners as well. So we, the customers, brought this pipeline on and asked for the potential for ownership. So just to talk to you about how that process worked. So the customers, so one of the benefits of having these customers align with us as we went to market was that we're able to use economies of scale to have such a large pipe to be as low cost as possible. So in aggregate, what you see here are the customers. I won't read them off, but those are the customers that have signed up these 20-year commitments. So in market speak, what we say is this pipe is, for the most part, fully subscribed. It has end-use customers ready to go, and we are waiting for the natural gas to arrive so we can provide it for our customers. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Mr. McAllister, to talk a little bit about it on the power generation side.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm the Managing Director of the System Optimization Team within the Regulated Electric Fuel and System Optimization Department. Just wanted to provide a little bit of background on my responsibilities. I handle the fuel support for the ACP gas transportation for the regulated generation side, so I support all the regulated utilities. I also am responsible for the unit commitment function and support, which produces the 7-day short-term economic unit commitment plan to reliably meet the load requirements for the Florida and Carolinas regulated electric portfolios. I'm also responsible for the fuel and fleet analytic function, which produces the 5-year forecast of fuel and system costs for the Duke regulated fleet that is used for fuel planning and other company processes. Prior to this position, I was the director of the natural gas, oil, and emissions team in the fuel procurement team, and so I have been involved with ACP from the onset. So with that, I want to jump in. Sasha pointed out some of the drivers of the project, and this slide is just the Carolinas natural gas usage from the generation fleet. So this doesn't include other jurisdictions. So if you look at it, I really want to outline the significant growth. So if you go back a decade or so, the electric fleet used about 30 BCF a year, which is about 80,000 MMBtu a day. Now, if you fast forward to 2018, that number has increased to 346 BCF a day, which is about 1 BCF a day on average, and our peak day is about 1.5 BCF a day. So to put some context around that, today we have roughly 435,000 MMBtu capacity. So, when Sasha talked about going to market, back in 14, this is some of the growth that we were foreseeing and beyond. So I just want to point out the context of the volume. Now, that growth over the last decade has been driven by a number of coal unit retirements. Duke has retired 30 coal units in the Carolinas since 2010. We've also added 6 combined cycles since 2011. So a lot of new gas, a lot of less coal, and in the coming weeks, we'll be adding another combined cycle at our Asheville facility. Now, if you look forward, you'll see that growth continues, and there's 3 primary drivers of that. One is the Asheville combined cycle. The second one are 3 co-fire projects. I'm sure you're aware we have 3 large coal facilities that we're converting to be able to burn natural gas at Cliffside, Marshall, and Blues Creek. And then the last is just the in-service of ACP. With ACP, we're able to access much lower cost gas, so that incrementally brings a lower cost supply source, which when we're dispatching our fleet, lowers our incremental dispatch costs. So that too adds to this growth. So really, I think from a need perspective, that's really the takeaway from this slide is, I told you how much transportation we have, 435,000 MMBTUs. And when you look out to the green bars, our average daily use grows to about 1.2 to 1.3 BCF a day, with certainly our peak day being much higher than that. I'm sorry, I didn't click that soon enough. Sasha talked about the prolific growth, and as Brian did as well. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but the thing about the ACP project, it provides us direct access to the growing Marcellus and Utica shale supply plays in the Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and East Ohio regions. This slide is just a snapshot of the U.S. shale production from the EIA from their October report and shows the growth in BCF per day over time. Today, total U.S. production is approximately 92 to 93 BCF a day, and you can see that shale production is a large majority of that. The Marcellus and Utica production is now around 31 BCF a day and accounts for roughly 30% of the U.S. Dry production. So once again, looking back when we went to market for this, these numbers are even higher than what we saw back then. So the key takeaway here is ACP provides us that direct access to that supply, which will provide us a much more stable natural gas source and reduce some of the volatility for our customers. And so with that lead in talking about this, the next slide, before when I was just outlining kind of the firm transportation we have and the amount of gas burns we have, certainly there's a big difference. So Duke Energy on the electric side does procure a significant amount of gas in we'll call it the Carolinas Zone 5 market area. And what that means is we fully utilize the transportation we have, but on top of that, we are buying gas from other folks who have transportation to procure for our our generation fleet. Now, the other thing about Transco is a fully subscribed pipeline. So in recent years, we have seen more volatility in this particular region, in particular, the polar vortex in 2014, and then the bomb cyclone in 2018. There certainly have been other smaller events, but those two certainly are highlights. The chart here is simply the first 8 days of January of 2018. The red line is the Transco Zone 5 spot price, and then the blue line is the Dominion South spot price. So you can see there, during that time period, the average price for the Carolina zone, we'll call it, was over $40 an MMBTU. So very, very volatile. The Dominion price was obviously significantly below that in the mid $3 MMBTU range. The other thing that Duke did during that time period, we burned 43 million gallons of fuel oil in January of 2018, and that was both for economics. With such high gas prices, we consumed a lot more oil, but we also consumed a lot of it for reliability needs for our system peak needs. I think some of this gets down to, as I said, the market is fully subscribed on Transco, and some of that price volatility is a function of, fundamentals, of course, but certainly the scarcity of pipeline capacity. So from a need perspective, those are three of the key drivers, at least from an electric side. You know, we want to be able to access the gas. As the commissioner said, our gas needs from today and beyond. You know, this isn't this is a multi-decade bridge. So certainly, this project is very important to us achieving some of those goals.
Our last slide is just to illustrate the interconnection of Atlantic Coast Pipeline with the Piedmont distribution system, as well as some of the locations of Duke's generation sites. So just to highlight a couple points on this map. So you can see Transco is the blue line labeled there. Atlantic Coast Pipeline is the green line coming closer to the coast. And so just to highlight, the point of ACP coming in at key points is that typically for Piedmont Natural Gas, if there is a generation site or large manufacturing or industrial load in the coastal part of the state, we have to expand with pipe infrastructure coming off of Transco all the way down into the coast. So now that you have ACP coming on this side of the state, it dramatically reduces the need for incremental infrastructure to serve that load. And ACP is coming in at a pressure that really benefits and allows the gas to be distributed among the Piedmont system very cost effectively. And so that is why, the main reason why the pipeline was designed to come down this part of the state was to allow for the substitution of having to build out laterals coming off of Transco. And so we just want to highlight that. Some other points on the map, as Joe mentioned, is just all of the generation sites that you see here that have been built, as well as the squares represent the dual-fired coal plants. So these are the coal plants that are in process or already have been converted to be able to burn natural gas when prices are economic to do so. So with that, we wanted to finish our presentation and open up for any questions you might have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners? Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I enjoyed your presentation and very interested. And most of you have listened to my questions in the past and probably can answer them before I ask them. But the thing that I need to talk to you about again is, and I know where you are now, and you've got your hands full. I can understand that with moving forward, but I'm still interested in the fact of the economic development prospect that this could be for the PD and the Grand Strand area of South Carolina, and noticing that the pipeline intended ending spot is right on the border almost. So I want to keep this alive in your minds that this could be needed. I was thinking this week, I've got a place down at North Myrtle Beach, and we can't use gas packs because we don't have the supply for heat for gas. And this would, be a tremendous asset just to the residential area if more areas could have the ability to heat with natural gas for the expense and whatnot. And it would certainly cut back on some of the need we need for new generation. We have a lot of agricultural needs in this area of the state that could be met with natural gas at a much lower volume that they're having to pay for fuel oil at this time. So these are some of the points that I'm going to continue to make. I've got maybe 6 more months on the commission, but if you come back, you'll hear it again. But I thank you very much for being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think your point is very similar to what we see along the coastal parts of North Carolina, where when we have a industrial load today come to us on Piedmont and ask for them to interconnect to our system, we are unable to provide them firm natural gas. We can give them non-firm, but what that means is during peak times, we will have to cut them off. And it's not until ACP is in service that we'll be allowed to firm them up and allow them to operate around the clock, which for certain manufacturing processes is very important. So you're absolutely right. Certainly having a pipeline like this closer to these underserved areas should make the business case for connecting that much better.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Whitfield?
Thank you, Commissioner Belser. Got some questions for a couple of you now, but Mr. Heslin, I'll start with you. I think, I guess, from the very outset, you stated you're here as the LDC and DEC and DEP. You're not really here for the purposes of this allowable ex parte on behalf of the pipeline, even though your companies are part owner. You're here specifically today representing the LDC and DEC and DEP, correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
In that regard, I'm going to come back to that and ask you a question in that framework in just a minute, but I want to mention something that you brought out, and if either one of the two want to jump in, that's fine, Mr. McAllister or Mr. Weintraub, but you mentioned that you were talking about the permitting from U.S. Forest Service, and now it's been determined that it's National Park Service and not U.S. Forest Service. And I get the fact that the Appalachian Trail runs all the way from Georgia to Maine on the basically on the Blue Ridge chain, but you said something about it being 600 feet below the Appalachian Trail. Explain that to me, if you would.
From a geographic standpoint, this is my understanding, is that the proposed route of ACP is through in that area, the George Washington National Forest. The Appalachian Trail at that crossing point is at the top of let's say a ridge or a mountain. The pipeline will be bored
just like
at an elevation that is 600.
So like a tunnel.
That's right. So it's approximately 600 feet below the trail. So the argument that we've seen in the briefing by the pipeline, or at least the facts that have been laid out, is that it is from an elevation 600 or almost 700 feet below the trail. At that crossing, there will be no impact to the walking trail itself, at least from at that point. And then, as I said, I'm just as an observer and reading their briefs, that's what has been presented by the Solicitor General as well as the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the amicus briefs.
Well, that's what I envisioned, mental picture in my mind when you said it, but I wanted to verify. And obviously, it's obvious from the maps, the way the Appalachian Trail runs and the proposed path of this pipeline. Without that crossing, you wouldn't even get into the Blue Ridge Parkway, of course, which is for people to basically parallel it with a paved road. So, and you aptly explained that about the Blue Ridge Parkway, so I'm not going to go down that path. It sounds like there's a big hurdle before you get there. So, Mr. Heslin, there's been some talk among some of the LDCs, and this is the reason I asked if you were, clarified that you were here on behalf of as an LDC, DEP. There's been some talk about LDCs going back to FERC and contesting some of the ROEs that have been awarded. And of course, I'm talking about existing interstate pipelines. What, if any, impact do you think that might have? And again, I realize if that were to happen, it would benefit the LDC, Piedmont Natural Gas, ultimately ratepayers of the LDC. But what, if any, impact do you think that might have on the pipeline? And I realize you have commitments from customers of the interstate pipeline, but what, if any, impact can you share any insight to that?
I can. Generally, if the returns or their allowable returns at the federal level, at the FERC level, were to decrease, it could impact the motivation to invest in those types of facilities. As you noted, Commissioner Whitfield, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is currently predicated on negotiated or preceding agreements that run, as Mr. Weintraub indicated, I believe 25 years. But a decreased allowable return certainly would impact the resulting recourse rates. And as I said before, investors are looking at those from a general perspective on the gas and the electric side. And if there was to be a substantive decrease in the return on that investment, it would impact probably the availability of future facilities. As an LDC, we're customers of those facilities. So when we are in rate case proceedings with interstate pipelines, we try to ensure that the return that is usually baked into any settlement is reasonable, understanding that we'll be passing that on to our customers.
To your customers. All right, well, thank you for that explanation, and I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, and some of this may go on to Mr. Weintraub, but if either one of you want to jump in, that's fine as well. Mr. Weintraub, you talked about, and I can't quite see it on my handout here and couldn't quite see the screen far enough, but you talked about an interconnection. You talked about interconnection points within the Piedmont system. There were 3 of them, I believe, in North Carolina, but you specifically talked about an interconnection, I believe it was compressor station 165 in Transco Zone 5.
Yes.
And again, I've looked, it looked like it to me, it could be anywhere from Charlotte all the way up into Virginia. Tell me where that is specifically. Where is that 165?
So the interconnection that I'm referring to is going to be where the ACP, I'll use the light blue hash, will interconnect with the Transco pipeline. So that will be that interconnect right there.
So a little north of Charlotte, is that? No?
In Virginia.
Oh, in Virginia, okay. Okay, the above, I just see a hash right above Charlotte, but you're talking about up into Virginia.
Yes, that's correct. So where that interconnects, and the point of that interconnect being is that we do have customers that will be best served coming off of Transco. So that won't be a way, but we'll be able to optimize the portfolio and buy the supply, if it's cost effective, in the Marcellus region and have it delivered via ACP interconnected with Transco and down to customers along Transco as well.
Well, I can see it on that slide now. It's clear, very clear, but I was looking at a smaller inset
Yes,
I
we
think on
apologize.
page 9, and I couldn't see it. But, well, anyway, next, what you've mentioned, you talked about competitiveness. You talk about competitiveness, both, I guess, in our area, you'd be referring to Transco and Southern, and being having another supply, another source, but also with that interconnection, you're given, you're taking some of the demand off Transco. So in a sense, you're providing a little competition, but also you're aiding them in a way too. Is that a fair statement?
Well, what I would say is we go out and procure the lowest cost fuel that we go out and buy. So by allowing for an additional option to have another pipeline with another supply source, we are now able to, for both Piedmont and for the Duke Electric as well, we have more options to go to market in order to buy. And if in this particular case, the supply point that we talk about, this Dominion South, which is the price point in Marcellus, if that's a lower cost price than some other typical places that we buy, we'll be able to procure and bring that fuel to our customers using Atlantic Coast Pipeline as a potential option. That option doesn't exist, which is why on Mr. McAllister's chart, just to iterate here on this chart, what this is depicting is that Dominion South price point in the Marcellus region sat at sub $5 throughout this cold weather. So in other words, there was gas available, there just wasn't capacity, pipeline capacity to bring it to the markets. And so all of a sudden, that pipeline capacity that you see in the red, that's delivered into the Carolinas. So now that price point that you see is someone's willing to pay a higher price because it's delivered in the Carolinas. And I'll buy at, I'm giving you a hypothetical, if you will, I'll pay $120 an MMBTU for that fuel, which is a lot for the fuel. And that's cheaper than, say, running a propane, or cheaper than running fuel oil, or cheaper than buying in a market. Whereas if we had, if a customer had, or excuse me, if we had a pipeline contract that reached back into the Marcellus region, and we'd be able to buy that Dominion price, that Dominion fuel, that fuel at that Dominion price, and bring it along that contract to our customers. Hence, you wouldn't have the volatility associated with this cold weather on this particular cold spell.
So in that example you just described, you had the supply source, you had the resource up there, you had the high demand, but you just flat out lacked the capacity to get it here.
Yes, if I may, I'm familiar, so Joe, if it's okay, what I'll say is, as Mrs. McAllister indicated, that roughly on this day was a high burn day, so call it 1.5 BCF of gas was burned on this day. And under contract, Joe, I believe you said it was 435,000.435 BCF per day. So the requirement then would be to go out and buy roughly 1 BCF of delivered gas. So you no longer have contracts to bring that gas. You're now asking others who have contracts, hey, I will buy it from you at a price that's cheaper than my next alternative. And in some cases, the cheaper alternative was burning fuel oil, which is why 43 million gallons of fuel oil were burned in the month of January. Because in some cases, it's lower cost to burn fuel oil than it is to buy this high-cost gas. It's just the economics of how you dispatch a generation fleet.
And one last question, could you go back to the slide we had on the screen?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
I'm sorry, yes. Right there, that one. A lot has changed, and certainly in natural gas in the short 10, 11 years I've been a commissioner. As you just described, everything flowing from Texas, Louisiana region up to the Northeast, and now you've got the reversal of these interstate pipelines, and now with the other graph you showed with the most of the, or larger portion of the production of that shale gas coming from Marcellus and Utica, there's still that supply, great supply up there, and I'm going to kind of ask the question in reverse of Commissioner Hamilton. You've heard Commissioner Hamilton today, and you've heard him in previous allowable ex parte briefings, and I think he's had that question quite a few times. But let's just, for a moment, suppose that that pipeline stops as it's planned in just outside of Lumberton, North Carolina. You cited some things, I think, in your, Mr. Weintraub, in your portion about meeting existing and growing needs, new source of high pressure, and having new supply points and operational flexibility. You cited about 4 things there. What specifically to South Carolina ratepayers, how would South Carolina ratepayers, both of Piedmont Natural Gas, I guess South Carolina customers of Piedmont wouldn't necessarily benefit, but what benefits would South Carolina ratepayers maybe of DEP see, or what other benefits other than taking some of the pressure, if you will, off of Transco, that might help some of the Piedmont folks, but what benefits can South Carolinians expect to see if it stays where it is?
Yes, sir. Well, from a Piedmont perspective, so Piedmont Natural Gas operates in the white service territory that you see here on this map. So, one the advantages would be that we do operate this as a portfolio. So the costs to serve, the fuel costs to serve our customers across the entire Piedmont service territory is pooled and then allocated to customers on a methodology. So roughly, I'm giving you a rough number, 15% of costs are allocated to the customers that Piedmont proudly serves in the upstate portion of South Carolina. So anything we do to lower that overall portfolio cost will benefit the customers that we have.
And I would say the same for Duke, right? We operate our fuel and generation portfolio in the Carolinas as a system. So the benefits of that lower cost supply, well, to the share that gets allocated to South Carolina would provide a benefit. And one other note, we were talking earlier about the usage of Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Duke would expect to use a very high percentage of that at the very onset. So it's not something we would, be using for peaking needs. It would be something that when it comes in service, we expect to utilize a very high percentage of that capacity, given the price advantages, which has the advantage to our portfolio that would, in part, get allocated to South Carolina.
So the same answer, even more so for DEP, you having generation resources in both North and South Carolina, that North Carolina, we all know that electrons don't know state lines, so, and we all know that DEP goes across the state line in both states. So I guess that's what you're trying to tell me.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
That's all I have, Commissioner Belser.
Commissioner Irvin?
Thank you. I suppose that there's no alternative route that would bypass. There's no way to bypass the Appalachian Trail to get through to the destination. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, Commissioner Irvin. And the current path runs through the federal lands of the U.S. Forest Service, so that's correct.
And there's no other alternative route even being considered or proposed?
I'm not aware of that. My understanding, based on our observations, is that they're appealing the Fourth Circuit decision regarding the Appalachian Trail.
Well, back to my earlier thought about some kind of negotiated settlement. It might, one of the things that Duke and Dominion and Southern Company could bring to the table would be a proposal which would accelerate the closure of the coal-fired facilities in exchange for, in other words, shutting down those coal plants sooner, and in the event you could get gas to supply the gas, the new gas and existing gas units. That's one thought. And then, solar is expanding, continues to expand on several levels, and you might could, even get them involved in the negotiations and see if they could assist with meeting demand. That might be a piece of the puzzle to consider. I know that North Carolina already has in place a competitive bid solar piece, and we're looking at that as well. We've opened a docket on it, and but again, I think that there's enough common ground to at least try and reach out and see if there's some way you could incorporate some of these things in a proposed IRP or going forward. The other thing that everybody's interested in is and we don't talk about much, but we just issued a directive yesterday on energy efficiency. And there's some things that we could do in the entire region in terms of trying to improve energy efficiency, both at the residential and commercial industrial level. And maybe a beefed up proposal in that arena might attract some interest from your opponents because, again, it's a win-win-win situation across the board. And so I'm looking for long-term solutions. You know, it's not easy, but it's worth a try. We don't really have other options. And having been in the litigation business earlier in my career, I always told parties, you know, you've got flexibility in settlement negotiations that you don't have in court. Just because you get a legal issue resolved doesn't mean you win. It probably means you've got more litigation in front of you. And that's just time-consuming and costly. So I always encourage, when I was a circuit judge, to the parties involved to look at the freedom and flexibility of a mediation. You can always walk away if you can't reach an agreement. But at the same time, if you begin discussions, sometimes everybody's surprised that you can find a path forward. So I just encourage you to look at that option. Thank you. Appreciate your presentation today. And, you know, the other thing we haven't really talked about, but Santee Cooper is up for sale, and there are a lot of coal-fired plants in their system, and you know, they're going to need to convert at some point to natural gas. So we've got that other piece out there, that there are a lot of residents in South Carolina that could benefit from cheaper natural gas. I looked at Bloomberg this morning, and the natural gas futures prices have now slumped because of this supply glut that we have. The supply is overrun demand. It's 2.54 per million BTUs. If it finishes a year at that level, it will be the lowest average gas prices since 1999. And it's projected to continue in that realm. And I'll send you a copy of this article because I know you have to have it for your, Jeff, for your record. But I'll email a copy to our chief counsel and he can forward it to you. But because of the 750,000 net acres in the Marcellus and Utica Shale formations with stress from West Virginia to Pennsylvania and Ohio, the Chevron has had to write down on their earnings because they're losing so much money from the price, the cheap price of natural gas. They announced today that they expect to write down as much as $11 billion in fourth quarter alone. $11 billion. That's money that our ratepayers could save if we had access to that natural gas. You know, all throughout the region, and all boats rise with the tide. If, just like it was said earlier, if we were able to get cheaper natural gas in our state, it could be a renaissance for the PD. And we were in a public hearing Monday night down on the coast near Bluffton, Coosawassie Island. Is that how you pronounce that? Allowable Island. And I was amazed at the kind of growth on the coast, and I'm sure we've seen that through North Carolina, Virginia, but the residential development's just taken off. The Sun City down in South Carolina, and a lot of the snowbirds from the Northeast are coming down and retiring because of the quality of life and cost of living. They would love to have their utility bills levelized or drop in the future. And this, as you retire, your income typically can go down, and so we need to look at these issues because it's out there if we can get it here. And but I think it's an important issue, and it's one it ties into everything we do, because to the extent that we can reduce that winter peak load, it also factors back into rate making, avoided cost, and the like. And that's what we all need to be working toward. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. I had one brief question. I think this would go to Mr. McAllister, and it's on your slide 14 that shows the Piedmont system.
Yes, okay.
I was just curious about the Cardinal line. Who owns that?
Cardinal is owned by three parties, Transco, Piedmont, and Public Service of North Carolina.
And that's just kind of a connecting line to get the gas?
Yes,
from
it's-
Transco over into the eastern?
Yes, it is a connecting line from the north of Transco Zone 5 into the Piedmont system down near Goldsboro.
It just kind of jumped out because it was such a bright color compared to the others.
Yeah, there's a lot of pipelines on this map, so we had to get creative with some of the colors.
And that line is fully subscribed, as is most of the pipelines that we show here, because of the growth that you see in the Raleigh Triangle Durham area as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Bell, sir, do you mind if I have a quick follow-up to what you just asked?
Commissioner Whitfield?
That line is a very example of some of the laterals you're saying that ACP would allow you to avoid building.
That's correct.
All right.
Absolutely.
Ms. Smith, anything further from the company? Mr. Nelson, anything further? Thank you very much for your presentations today, gentlemen. You certainly presented us with a lot of information. There being nothing further, we will adjourn this session, and thank everyone for attending. Please make sure that you sign your sheets and turn them in at the back, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.